Hey everybody, Assalamu alaikum. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the notify button so you know when you're getting new episodes. And we just want to grow this project. I thank you in advance. Without further ado, let's get it rolling. The Shout Out Show. Well, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, everybody. This is me, your host, Preacher Moss, the host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show, our Saturday edition. I'm so happy you're able to make it here. It's always a pleasure to host you. I can always give the orders of business. If this is your first time coming to the Shout Out Show and you're getting the Shout Out Show experience, say something in the comment box. We'd like to welcome you. If it's not your first time and you've been here before, listen, you know how I feel about you. I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate your contribution. As I said in the advertisement earlier, please hit the subscribe button. We're trying to grow the project and make it something special. Today's topic, brothers and sisters, we're going to be shouting out our aunts and uncles. I call it aunts and uncles basically the backbone of the family. Those are the people who, when you got in trouble, those who your mother and father talked to before they came and administer whatever justice was supposed to come. And it was funny because it was a cooperative. If you're Muslim, that's actually your original shura right there. Your uncles, your aunts, and your grandparents. Because we celebrate our grandparents as we should. We celebrate our parents as we should. We celebrate our kids as we should. But too often, we don't holler about the aunts and uncles. Now, let me guys tell you something. I've learned a lot about family foundations over the years. And one of the things I learned is to appreciate those people who contribute to the family, and they may not be in your family, but we call them aunties, we call them uncles. And for lack of a better word, I like to call them pioneers because a lot of them were the people who helped me be who I am outside of my parents. And when you think about it, they weren't around you by accident. You know what I'm saying? They were around you because your mom and your dad were comfortable with them and they knew that whatever's coming out of their mouth was positive and it went to your growth and development. Now, why am I talking about it today? Because we're not talking about it enough. Brothers and sisters, I am a comedian, but I'm going to tell you, a comedian is made of, it's a sum of parts. It's an affirmation of where you grew up, how you grew up, and who was in your circle. Now, I want to shout out aunts and uncles. I do. I want to shout out aunts and uncles. I'm saying it now, I'm 53 years old, but here's the reality, man. Out of all my aunts and uncles, I only have one aunt left. At one point, I had I had three uncles. No, I have four uncles, five uncles, and now I have none. Last passed away last summer, or this summer, as a matter of fact. Was it this summer? No, it was last summer, excuse me. And I only have one aunt left. And for those of you who want to understand, there's categories, if you will. There's categories of aunts and uncles, to be honest. You had aunts who had different, let's say they had different roles, if you will. When I say roles, I mean like they did sometimes. And a lot of times you can figure out what their role was, specifically at holidays. Now, everybody had that aunt that could cook. You had two aunts that could cook. Let me tell you the breakdown of the two aunts that could cook. The one aunt, that was the one who would fix this fabulous food. You would eat it, you'd be filled, you'd be happy. I'm talking about a time when you were happy eating food. There was anticipation. There was the one aunt that would let you eat. She would fix you a fabulous meal. That was one aunt. The other aunt was the one who let you eat early before everyone else get in. Remember when she made cake, she let you lick the batter? Yeah. Remember biscuits? When it came out, the hot biscuits, you got the first one. And what she always tell you, don't you tell nobody. And you didn't tell a soul. That was the first act of loyalty. Those biscuits, that cake, those cupcakes, those muffins, that pie. I'm telling you something. I had an Aunt Dot. Okay, her name was Aunt Dud. Her real name was Christine Griffin, but we called her Aunt Dud. Let me tell you something about Aunt Dud. She was a G in that kitchen. You know how people say, "Well, I want stuff for my birthday. I want stuff for Christmas." I ain't want none of that. You know what I wanted for Aunt Dud? What I wanted for Aunt Dud? As long as I was black, you know what I wanted for her? I didn't want to give her for Christmas or my birthday. The only thing I asked for her, brothers and sisters, is that she made a world famous pound cake. And I'm talking about pound cake you want to fight over. I can be honest. There's some relatives that I fought over pound cake. And I'm talking about in my Muslim years. I'm not talking about as a child. I'm talking about acting out, issuing threats of violence for people who decided they want a piece of that pound cake. And that's real talk. And then you have other people. You have your aunts. I have an aunt, my Aunt Maxine, former attorney. Aunt Maxine is a party starter. People wait for her to come to the party. Remember the aunt that was a party starter? You had an aunt who was a trouble starter. She'd tell everybody all your business. So when everybody came in, it was a discussion. Remember that aunt. But there was an aunt who was a party starter. She was a party starter. I'm not saying she drank or anything like that. But when she came, you knew it was on. My Aunt Maxine, this is how crazy she was. My Aunt Maxine broke dance to a B.B. King record. Do you know how slow B.B. King is? She broke dance to a B.B. King record. Well, let me give her a shout out all the way from South. Brother Fahim, walaikum assalam, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All the way from South Africa, just so you people know. I've been in South Africa before. Don't even fool yourself. I've been there. Okay, people? Listen, Fahim, thank you so much for coming. I think it's your first time on the show, brother. We appreciate you. I'm talking about aunts and uncles. There's another type of aunt, too. This is the aunt that will give you that stern talking to when you messed up in school. That was like my Aunt Shirley for me. But I had a good relationship with my Aunt Shirley because I saw how she talked to everybody else, and it just made me not want to be in that position. It just made me not want to be. Like, she talked to her husband, who I'll get to in a minute. But she would say it like through her teeth, like Maya Angelou with an attitude. She'd be like if he did something wrong, she wouldn't say stop acting a fool. She said like this. She said, stop acting a fool. Let me give you this close up on that. She would say, stop acting a fool. Okay, people. And my point is, you had all these characters in your life, and we make dua for them, we pray for them, we appreciate them. But I'm talking about a mix of characters in your life that shaped your life. Now, people say, Preacher Miles, who's the funniest person in your family? I'm going to tell you something. I was blessed to have quite a few characters in my family. On my mother's side, on my father's side. But I'm going to say hands down, and Pops, if you're watching, please don't get upset. Hands down, the funniest person in the family was my Aunt Ruth. Now, my Aunt Ruth lived into the 60s. She never got married, never had children. She was like the extra mom for everybody. But my Aunt Ruth, she was a classic. She was classic round the way girl. I guess you could say that word, round the way. And she just didn't take stuff from people. She didn't take stuff from people. I'm gonna give you guys a little tidbit. My Aunt Ruth was so gangster. She taught me how to cuss. And let me tell you something. By the time I got into 6th grade, I had a PhD in profanity. Let's just call it what it is. And I owe that all to her. And she told me you need to know how to cuss people. Cuss people, because I don't believe you can fight a lick. Is that wisdom, brothers and sisters? Is that wisdom? She taught me how to cuss people out because she thought I couldn't fight a lick. And I really could when I was younger. Later, when I got older, I could cuss real good and I could fight real good. But here's my point. It all fed into this crazy narrative whereby good, bad, indifferent, in between, all these people reminded me that I was loved. So the aunts and uncles, when we go through life cycles and we lose our parents and things like that, you know what? When we lose an aunt or uncle, ooh, it hurts. It hurts. Because that person wasn't directly in your life, but they were always around your life. Like, you didn't come home to them most of the time, but they were always in your life. Let me tell you guys something. I was always blessed when I was at my grandmother's house. I was always blessed, and I'll tell you why I was always blessed. Because when I walked in, I had 2 of my aunts who still lived there, and I had my uncle that still lived there. 2 of my aunts and my uncle. Now, my Aunt May loved her, but she liked to start stuff. And I had an adopted aunt. Her name was Aunt Ann Bowman. Her and my Aunt Ruth were buddies for real. I'm talking about the original Thelma and Louise. I mean, they allowed me to experience adult life and see things and say things I shouldn't say. My Aunt Ruth actually took me to my first roller derby. And during that roller derby, she cussed out one of the people who were the roller derby people. And the roller derby people decided to come into the stands to fight my Aunt Ruth. And while she stood there swinging her purse and they were swinging their skates, boy, she laid out a string of profanity that should be in the Smithsonian or the African American Museum. You hear what I'm saying? And not to be a punk, for a little bit, I got to curse too. Now, I'm not saying cursing is good, but I'm saying when you had a roller derby, you got to let it hang out. Okay. Now, those are the aunts. And we love our aunts because they're close to our mothers or they're close to our fathers. So you know that there's a history there. At some point in time, they were equal. They were children. And plus, aunts will tell you things about your parents that you didn't know. Like how your mom used to be Mr. Socialite and Miss Hangout, and she don't want you to hang out, but she hung out. You know, you ever get to throw that in their face? I mean, it's beautiful. It's love. Now, the flip side of the aunties, brothers, and sisters, of course, is the uncles. I have to tell you something. Before I get to the uncles, the aunts on my mother's side were amazing people. My Aunt Shirley and my Aunt Florence were both nurses. So he had two nurses on one side. On my father's side, my aunt worked at the Marine Post in D.C., the Marine Post in D.C. My Aunt Dottie never married. She got a PhD. She worked in D.C. public schools and Maryland public schools. My Aunt May worked at the hospital. Aunt Ann Bowman, I don't know what she did. I think, she just scared people. Now, when you get to the uncles, now it's a whole different thing about uncles, particularly uncles that grew up in the 40s and 50s. Most of the uncles that grew up in the 40s and 50s, let me tell you, they hustlers, they grinders. All right, they are the original shack food. I mean, they get out and get it done. And I'm talking about getting it done. We ain't talking about no rules. When a sale went down where there's no receipts, we're talking about get it done. We're not talking about in the middle of the store. We're talking about out of the back of the trunk. We're also talking about possibly in the alley, but they got it done. It was a different kind of economics. You know what I'm saying? Uncles had a different kind of economics. Now, let me explain this part to you. I had two uncles, one on my mother's side and one on my father's side. Now, my one uncle on my father's side, Uncle Reggie. In fact, my middle name is Reginald. It's named after him. My Uncle Reginald was potentially one of the best salesmen that ever walked the earth. I mean, he could sell you anything. I'm not saying he lied. I'm just saying he sold you something. And maybe later you figured out it was a lie. But that's not the point. To be able to gauge your interest and hold your interest and have it carry over a period of time, he was a master. I mean, literally. I mean it. I believe that my Uncle Reggie, given a chance, he could have sold Shaitan a Quran and made him take Shahada. That's how good he was. So, but he was a 70s guy. And everybody knows your uncles that came up in the 70s, they got a different vibe, man. My Uncle Reggie was one of the first ad account executives for Xerox in the DC area. If you ever see James Brown on NFL Today on CBS, he actually gave James Brown his first job when he came from Harvard because he didn't make the pros. And look at James Brown and my uncle, he passed away. Man, I'll be pleased with him. Most of these people have passed away. Like I said, I got two aunts left. You know what? He was a funny guy because he was a storyteller. My Aunt Ruth was a character. He was a storyteller. When I talk about storytelling, I mean seriously, like standing on a corner with one or two people and you will watch people gravitate toward this man on the corner and he would sit and spin stories, and that's what they loved him for. They loved him for that. And he could, it was a natural thing, but it was funny because he just had that space. He wasn't a gruff guy. You get him upset, okay, he's going to go at you. You want a gruff guy. But he had the magic of gab. And everybody has somebody in their family. Everyone has somebody in their family that could talk you out of a situation. Maybe you got yourself into some trouble. You call that uncle, he goes and he talks to him. Maybe something with the police. Yeah, maybe in the back of a squad car. He was the guy that you would call to talk the police out of letting you out. And I'm saying I saw this with people who got in trouble. They would come for my Uncle Reggie, and he would go, and the whole world would just change behind this guy. And you know what? We do need that now. We do that. We do need that. Because one of the things that's missing in this whole protest meeting, this whole protest movement, this space behind George Floyd, is we're missing the aunties and the uncles that have that historical imperative about where you come from and where you're going. Okay? Now I had other uncles. I had my Uncle Charles. Uncle Charles is a funny guy. He's about 2 feet tall, but his personality was 8 feet. And ironically, he married my Aunt Dud, and she was like 1.5 feet tall. So I don't know how that worked out. But listen to me. He was a funny guy. And what I remember about him, he was a golfer. He was the first guy to turn me on to golf. Like he would go over at Roosevelt Field and hit golf balls over by the stadium, and it was like he was a really interesting dude, man. He worked hard. He was a hustler. He was a scrambler. Always provided for his family. My Uncle Frank was the same way. My Uncle Frank, I can't remember where Uncle Frank worked. All I know about Uncle Frank, and I loved him, was that every time I saw him, he had money. And you know that your favorite aunt and your favorite uncle don't want to who? Have a couple dollars for you. Those were the ones you hung around. And remember when the other cousins would come around, you didn't want them to be around? You know why? Because you didn't want to mess up your dollar flow. You hear what I'm saying? You don't want to mess up with your cash flow. You need that couple dollars. Uncle Frank was the right person for me. My Uncle Doc was that person for me. It still is. All right. So look, I got to get into the bread and butter now. We always have that uncle who's just crazy. I had 2 of them. My Uncle Jimmy was crazy dude. He's from Cleveland, Ohio. Shout out to Bashir Jones. He's from Cleveland, Ohio, Vietnam vet, smart dude, accountant. Came back from Vietnam. I mean, he married my Aunt Maxine. Remember the Aunt Maxine I told you that came and she could break dance to a BB King record? He married her. So you guys see where this whole thing is going. You're like, preach, we understand your condition right now. You've been dealing with situations for a long time in your life. Yes, I have. Okay, so Uncle Jimmy was an interesting guy because in the D.C. area, he worked for a construction company called Volpe Construction. Now, we talk about how crazy these people are, but we need to talk about how smart they were, particularly back in the times where everything was about Black liberation, Black equality, and trying to go out and get not equipment, but equality in these situations. All of my aunts and uncles grew up in segregation and Jim Crow. So I want you to think about that, because what you haven't heard is me talk about an aunt and uncle that was upset when they saw me. They loved me, they protected me, and I'm sure they did the same for you. My uncle worked for Volpe Construction. Now, if you're not familiar with Volpe Construction was the first construction company that had the contract for the Metro Rail in Washington, D.C., the original Metro Rail contract. And if you ever go to Washington, D.C., it's an expansive system. He was senior VP of that. I mean, he didn't stay at that job all his life. In his life, he had some issues, but I'm just telling you how smart he was to be able to have that contract and do that kind of work. He was an accountant. So I mean, this is how people made it work back in the day. And then there's my Uncle Earl. My Uncle Earl and my Uncle Reggie, probably the reason why I never had a straight job. Meaning, let's just call it what it was. I'm not good working for people, but I'm really not good working for white people. So my Uncle Earl and my Uncle Reggie always said to me, boy, if you get a chance not to work for the white man, don't work for that white man, because you don't want to be working for yourself. So that was the whole entree into being an entrepreneur. My Uncle Reggie, my Uncle Earl. My Uncle Earl drove trucks. But he was one of the guys, he drove trucks when he went out of town, when he came back into town. He was like, the joke about Jamaicans don't have one job. West Indian people don't have one job, they got like 8 jobs. My Uncle Earl, let me count off the jobs he had at one point. He drove trucks, he drove a cab, he managed a movie theater, he managed a baseball team, he ran a disco, and he managed an R&B group. And that could be all on one weekend, okay? And the characteristics of our uncles, if you will, is my Uncle Earl never had a filter, which is fun. It's like being around my Aunt Ruth and hearing her curse. My Uncle Earl never had a filter. But I mean, when he cursed, he was a dude. Like when he cursed, he could literally curse. And I mean make you cry curse. Not that light cursing like, damn. No, I'm talking about from the rooter to the tutor. When you got cussed out, literally, you'd have to stretch because that's how long it would be. That's how long you've been cussed out. You know how you yawn? That's what I'm talking about. Now, look, when I say filter, he said things that probably a child shouldn't hear. Probably a child shouldn't hear. I remember, hopefully there's no children. I remember hanging out with my Uncle Earl, which was my big joy. Yeah, it was my big joy because he was loud. Yeah, he was loud. He was rude. Oftentimes he was wrong, but he was unapologetic. This was the first time I ever saw somebody just unapologetic. And he let you know how he felt about you. You could tell, and he was a Southern dude. You know, you could tell when he pissed you off, when you pissed him off. Let me give a shout out, Northern Cali, my man, Irfan. Thank you for coming on, brother. Appreciate you coming on the telecast. Irfan out of Northern Cali. And I'm telling people, if you got some auntie and uncle stories, feel free. We got time, a little bit of time. But my Uncle Earl was a dude who basically, I can't say he didn't care. I think he didn't know to care. When something came in his mind, there was no filter. He was going to let you go. He's going to let you know. I remember sitting I was 8 years old. I was with my Uncle Earl. We were hanging out. And they started reminiscing, him and his little crew. He had a friend named Bobby Ray. That was his homeboy, Bobby Ray. And we were sitting there, and he and Bobby Ray were close. Bobby Ray owned a barbershop in town in Danville, Virginia. And they got to talking about women they dated before they got married. And it's a small town, so you pretty much know everybody who got married. So Bobby Ray was talking about all the pretty girls he knew. And my uncle was talking about all the pretty girls he knew. And all of a sudden, Bobby Ray lost his mind. Bobby Ray decided he wanted to talk about all the ugly girls that my uncle had dated. My uncle was like, wait a minute, what you talking about? And so he started about all the ugly girls my uncle dated. And then he had a couple of doozies that we knew about, but a couple of them, they were off the charts. Okay, my Uncle Earl was so ticked off at Bobby that he had broken the code. You don't talk about those type of things, at least not in public. He was so upset at Bobby, brothers and sisters, he looked at Bobby and goes, oh, so you want to talk about ugly girls I dated? Well, Bobby, I remember you dating somebody that was ugly, but he wasn't a girl. I'm like, oh my God. But someone you dated, but he wasn't a girl. People, I was scarred for life. But I miss that kind of conversation. I miss the fact that we don't actually have the aunts and uncles in place like we used to, because we're moving so fast. And I'm only bringing it up, you know why? Because with this whole COVID thing, a lot of us haven't been able to see our aunts and our uncles. We've been able to talk to them on the phone, but it's not like hanging out with them. It's not like sitting on the front porch with them and listening to their stories, the true ones, the false ones, the outright lies. I mean, it's okay. When you get a certain age, it's okay. As long as you're not running the country, it's okay. Any exaggerations and nuances. I miss my Uncle Earl talking about Bobby Ray and the men he dated that weren't girls. I thought that was hilarious. And I miss my Aunt Ruth. You know what? Every time, I don't advocate profanity, but I know how to carry myself. So just recently, I was washing some clothes and I left my hand on top of the washer while I was putting clothes in, and the dryer door fell down, fell right on my pinky. Bam! And for a minute there, as the pain ran up and down my inner core, I said, I'm hurt. But the words that came out of my mouth were a 100% testament to my Aunt Ruth, because I hit every leaf and limb on a profanity tree while my finger was still stuck underneath that door. And sometimes, people, we miss our aunts and aunties. You know why? Because those are the people that remind us of where our parents came from. They remind us that there was a time where family meant that much. And the cohesiveness, not I said cohesiveness, not adhesive, cohesiveness. A family is a thing that pains us when they leave our lives, when they pass away, when they return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for this show, I want to make a dua for all of your aunts and all of your uncles. You know why? Because they mattered and we love them. Everybody, listen, this is a shout out show. And this is your home. I want you to think of this as your home, okay? And so when we do things like this, I want you to feel welcome. I actually want you to bring people with you because, like I said, this is not my platform. You guys make this show work. So I'm out of here. And I just want you guys to know I enjoy you and peace and love. Talk to you soon. Check out our ad. See you next time. Hey everybody, this is your brother Preacher Moss. Listen, I hope that you enjoyed your shout out show experience. We'll be back with the next show, the next shout out show. A simple ask before you go, please help your brother out. Click that subscribe button, click that notify button, and I'll see you again on this side of the microphone. You probably wonder what that smell is. That's me. I smell good. And the reason I smell good is because I use oils from ShOUT. So I'm not saying you can't smell good. I'm not even saying you stink. I'm saying you have the opportunity to smell exquisite. Check out ShOUT.com for some of the best oils and scents in town.